Hello, my name is Joy Wisdom, and I'm the founder of Alunas Zest for Life program. Thank you for joining me tonight, and just wanted to inquire how many practitioners we had today, or is it just general interest that you're joining me for? Hopefully I will cover all of that with the presentation. We're going to discuss many aspects of health and where that comes from, and my quest to find those answers. Because I was a practitioner in the 1990s, and I got to a point of where I didn't have all the answers. I got to a point of where I had a huge toolbox, but I didn't have enough tools. And I'd trained with some of the very best. However, I was still left wanting. So I started a quest of my own in 2000, early millennia. And I started to look at what was the difference between some of my clients, and they could have very similar disorders, but they would react and recover or not in different ways. And I wanted to know why it was different. Why? We've all got a body, arms, legs, pumping heart. Why were we so different? Why is it that some people can resurrect and other people just fall? And so I will show you some of my findings and share with you what I found, the hidden factors, as I call them, that will go on to create health, emotional, mental disorders. So the company is called Alunas. It stands for All, Life, Learning, Oneness, Nurturing, Understanding, Soul Purpose and Integration. And the levels of finds within Alunas have become amazing, astounding, astonishing of what we find with people and their health issues. I developed Alunas and launched it in 2009. Since that time, a decade, I have been teaching practitioners my view on health and how we can do a lot more than we do today, and how we can then help people to stop suffering. Dissolve and Resolve Emotions are championing new ways, new approaches for emotional and mental health. And the therapy that I have devised, called DARE, Dissolve and Resolve Emotions, we are championing new ways, new approaches that are working amazingly well, turning people around from suicide, deep depression, and allowing them to move on and get their life back. So, facts and solutions. This is a new therapy with radical approaches, and we understand genetic influences, but we're very ignorant to emotional and psychological influences passed on by our family lineages. Science is now proving transference. It does exist, and it has been proved with Holocaust, generational victims, passing on trauma and depression to their grandchildren, subconscious defaults and fetal origins, reliving ancient traumas. We are living in critical times of evolution, and certainly with cyber technologies, will they enhance or will they scupper brain and human evolution? This is my book, Mirror Image. This is my latest book, and where I explain a lot of what's going on in America at the moment and a lot of what's happening in the world. And you can get this through my website, ebooks, etc. So Dissolve and Resolve Emotions, DARE for short, is a combination therapy with clinical, energetic, and healing techniques combined for amazing and profound results. It deals with present health issues, emotional, psychological disorders, the Groundhog Day, repetitive, historical, reincarnation, because we also look at past life influences here, emotional and inherited consequences, social relationship issues, spiritually holding us back. We find a lot of limitations on this whole list. We are more than the physical. Everything is connected, nothing is separate. And we are a combination of our present, our past, and our future. Have you ever wondered why some individuals are suffering and others don't? I explored this in early 2000. As a practitioner, I saw many people with health issues and pain. I would work 12 hours a day. And I trained in some of the best modalities. I had a big toolbox, and I was a one-stop shop because I dealt with nutrition, stress, clinical disorders. I trained as a craniosacral therapist. I specialized in women and children's health. I trained in pediatrics and could pick up the emotional trauma from the child inside the womb. I didn't feel all skills to deal with core of clients' issues. And I started a quest to find out and found many hidden factors. In DARE, we look at various psychological and emotional issues that come from formation, from the womb, the transference and conditioning from inherited generational trauma and absorption. We give answers to physical disorders, growing numbers of mental health issues, and enabling people to move on. I found that a lot of people's health issues aren't theirs. They have inherited the emotional and mental behavior that is causing further disorders and discontent within people's lives. So we live the abnormal, but think it's normal. We don't have anything to compare it with. And I've been treating clients on all of these issues for over 2 decades. We might all look the same with head and body, but the internal state is very different and unique for each of us due to internal conversions, aging internally faster than we look. Reincarnation and historical lives also influence and is part of the jigsaw. These hidden aspects affects behavior, cognitive behavior, memory, biological and hormonal stimulus will all be stimulated from these themes, topics that we are talking about now. So memories, emotions. Where there is emotion, there will be pain and suffering. Emotionally, we are affected mentally and psychologically, but also hormonally, biologically. And emotions can be lying dormant within the body and energetics. These marks are marks that have come up in sessions of where people's bruising, very, very deep bruising within the individual has come to the fore as we are removing all of these emotions from the individual. The more emotions we removed, these imprints are seen. Sometimes it's just red here up at the by the neck But other times, these are fingerprints, and we were dealing with abuse with this client. And as you can see, those finger marks were around the attack of the abuse, the fingers around the throat to harm this individual that she had lived before. So emotions can be lying dormant, and they become an imprint. They also become a limitation, a barrier to our physicality being able to work as it should. Energetics will be affected. Emotions will be regurgitated. In some cases, it becomes an overlay stored at the core of our health issues, and the memory is stored within the bone. If you have broken an arm, if you've broken a leg, those imprints, the memories of that impact, the shock will be there in the bones and the tissue. It won't come up on an x-ray, but it will be there. It is stored. So we can compare the emotional to physical, yet more deadly, hidden from view and causing all sorts of health and well-being dysfunctions. It becomes the glue for behavior and memories to remain, the groundhog replays, as they will come up and surface again at some point, connected to an emotion. And these emotions will come up from nowhere. It can be a song, it can be a word, it can be a place where we will suddenly have this welling up of emotion with no idea of where it's come from. You can even have it watching a film. So emotions are bound by fascia, tissue, memory, and injury. It's logged in energetics, in the physicality, and in the mind. It will set patterns for behavior, for physical and psychological response, working biologically and hormonally. We are more than the physical. Emotions can be the cause of decline in our health, well-being, life experiences, adverse trauma, and from the past, i.e. post-traumatic stress. It can be accumulated like time bombs, accumulating ready to strike at any time. And it comes by hormones, chemicals, peptides released internally, automatically creating emotions, actions, and reactions. In this picture here, I've got the words forever and always. We find karma, promises and vows are also part of this bigger picture of the treadmill that we keep going around. And we can very much be locked into words that we have spoken, decrees that we have made, and some of our words that we use do become decrees, always, never. They become decrees for our life. The other situation from this is that everything that we create goes into our quantum field. And DARE also works with the quantum field for the client, because you can remove many aspects, many hidden aspects, but if you don't deal with the quantum field, nothing's gone away. And this was the conclusion that I came to with around chronic disorders such as cancer, because we treat the symptoms and not the person. With DARE, we treat the person and look at the core of what is troubling or driving their situation. Past lives, reincarnation, resets. We find a lot of this. People are on a treadmill of old roles. They have been overlaid, as I call it. It can be involved with mental health issues, with types of behavior issues, mood swings. All of that can be involved in past life influences, where we actually change from who we are today to who we were in the past. And again, this can be emotionally driven. We don't associate past lives with health, with psychological or emotional impacts. However, they are alive and kicking and dominant in many, many ways. They will drive your self-esteem and self-worth, or lack of. If you've had lives of criticism, control, browbeaten, which has come from military, religious lives, also science lives, where you have been conditioned to live a certain way, it's very challenging for some people to step out of that. In some of those lives with religion, for instance, we would have said things like, I obey. We would give ourselves over to other people's behavior, how they thought we should be, our conditioning. We step into their shoes. And people are still on that treadmill. They won't move out of poverty because that's what they're promised. They won't move out of being good, obedience, obeying all the rules. So they can't step out of the box. They're still tied to those times, those emotions that may have been very, very harsh living. Those impacts would go very deep. Grief is another one, where we have lost someone that we loved deeply, and we still live with underlying levels of grief that come from those times. Underlying levels of fear, survival, all of those elements can kick in, and again will be associated with certain emotions, feeling caged, abandoned, rejected, all of those things, which won't make any sense now, but you are still living, still tied to it. The womb, pregnancy, and transference. It's a big element of our formation and how we have been formed, how the mother was during pregnancy. I talk to a lot of women at my workshops, talks, seminars, where they have said, I can see in my daughter, me and my emotions. I can see my mother's emotions in my daughter. And this is where the dominance of the genetics within those two people that come together to form as parents and create new life. That dominance in the ovum and the sperm will create the formation of the child. And that is one formation. But if the mother is feeling abandoned, rejected, not supported in her pregnancy, if she has fear around pregnancy, etc., she could have been raped. She could be overwhelmed with too many mouths to feed and not able to do it anymore. There can be lots and lots of aspects to this. But essentially, the mother will produce hormones that the infant will be bombarded with. And as they are bombarded, they will then form coping strategies. Their baseline of hormonal secretion will become that of the mother. And there may be variations on that. I have treated a lot of people who have had issues around their formation and how they have gone on to take drugs, have mental health issues, psychological issues, behavior issues that have gone on to plague them all of their lives. They don't fit into society. They feel anxious, they feel stressed, with no apparent reason as to why. But we find it being formed in the womb and them taking on their mother's emotions. There is nobody to blame here, but it does happen. And it happens where if the child has the cord around the neck, you will find that they will not want anything here around their neck. They are very conscious of people being too close. They may feel suffocated. Essentially, when they do have the cord around the neck, there is a lot of shock in the birth process that needs to come off. Otherwise, it will go on to create fear and anxiety from those moments of birth. Fetal origins and how we bond will be definitive. Neglect is part of the problem with mental health. When dragged up from delivery, we can't bond. It's impossible. The child and the mother will be affected by the drugs that have been taken. However, the child may feel betrayed and abandoned, neglected. Nurturing, kindness, and love are essential for living and feeling. It gives us the baseline ability to receive and feel stable. 80% of brain cells that a person will ever have are manufactured in the first 2 years of life. If the process of building those brain cells and connection between them goes wrong, the defects will be permanent, as science thinks. I have found that we can change that. I have found that we can re-stimulate pathways in the brain with the right techniques. Professor Rachel Yoder in New York has found biological markers with Holocaust victims and their children are linked to low cortisol levels and post-traumatic stress. Essentially, these grandchildren live the effects of their grandparents or great-grandparents, of where they have taken on board their fear, anxiety, which was severe PTS. We talk about these things, but there are great differences within saying PTS. You can have PTS from a car accident, but living in a concentration camp, that's going to be extreme. And extreme, the more dominant it's going to be biologically and hormonally secretions. Now, I have found that this jumps generations. Some generations it misses, and science believe that it is 3 generations. It's much, much bigger than that from my findings. So it gives evidence that traumas can and do pass down from one generation to the next. And obviously, it is diluting that person's life, because again, it will be undermining. It will be a low level and a level that they don't know any different from, but they will live Great Depression and anxiety with no reasons why. It's not theirs, but they live it. The frontal lobe is involved with overactivity and associated with behavior malfunction such as ADHD and autism. And science has proved that the formation of the frontal lobe is very much involved in hormonal stimulus and fetal formation and womb influences of the mother. Emotional detachment being influenced from early formation. I believe that this is a reason for the mental or psychological issue of attachment disorder. It's a psychological malfunction. And certainly it is part of our issues around mental health that has risen beyond measure over the last 20 years. And you can read more in my book, Pregnancy and Birth, which is all about children's and women's health. So it's not just about pregnancy. Neurology. The growth of the baby's brain literally requires positive interaction between mother and infant. The development of cerebral circuits depends upon it. And neurologists are beginning to understand exactly how a baby's interaction with their mum determines how and indeed whether the brain grows in the way that it should. In 2014, in the University of Atlanta, mice trials were taken and they found that information about traumatic or stressful experiences were passed down from the mouse to its pup. From a transitional perspective, results allowed them to appreciate how the experience of the parent before conceiving offspring markedly influences both structure and function in the nervous system of subsequent generations. At a conference in 2012, images were shown of brains of 2 3-year-old children. One brain, a third smaller, showed clear signs of underdevelopment, showing the long-term effects of neglect. The child with similar brain will grow into an adult who is less intelligent, less able to empathize with others, more likely to become addicted to drugs and involved in violent crime than the child on the left. Much more likely to be unemployed and to be dependent upon welfare, develop mental and other serious health problems. It shows us that we are creating an issue here by the neglect or the lack of love, lack of bonding that we are showing to our children. And sometimes the parents don't know how to do that because they've not been shown either. So it's not necessarily their fault. It's a fault through the lineage and the culture that is being replayed. Absorption was another hidden factor that I found. And we absorb from family, friends, in our job, in the supermarket, the environment, buildings, when we're traveling. We absorb other people's negativity. The positive isn't a problem. It's the negativity that is absorbed into our energetics and filters through and can then change and lower our support from our energetics, but also can affect us physically, psychologically. We become low, don't have the energetic support that we should have. When we have decline in the physical, it will affect our DNA, cells, tissue. And then the cells replicate, so we have more of the same. And we need to change that to make a difference for the individual. So biologically, we can absorb from the womb in fetal origins, but also through inherited generational trauma, the passing down of dominant behavior and emotions. We can also be conditioned, and as we do, as humans, we mirror, we copy, and we do that from a very early age. So essentially, if we aren't shown love, and we're not given smiles, we're only given sneers and shouting, we will copy that. Energetically, it will cause issues around our energetics, causing dysfunctions, actions and reactions, and we end up with this cause and effect that continues to plague us. We get caught in a loop, cycle and circle. The mind gets skewed from reactions and behavior out of control. We feel depressed, underwhelmed, overwhelmed from life, and emotions respond to the mind and vice versa, causing physical, mental actions and reactions. For instance, lives of suffering and poverty consciousness, inherited from our elders, and we continue the trait. We can't seem to get out of this poverty consciousness. Every time we get a bit of money, there is another bill that comes in. This is all part of IGTA, and it goes a long way back. It creates a mindset of lack of choice. And this is what we can help people to change. So, IGTA, inherited generation trauma, it's made up of emotions, memories, hormones, peptides, psychological impacts that will be formed or conditioned to the individual. It will change and create personality, characteristics, susceptibility to weakness in health, emotional and psychological disorders. It just doesn't stop because we carry on the hurts, the wounds, the memories that are held within. And we get onto this cycle and circle. Sponging, absorbing starts from fetal origins and sets a baseline for living and brain hardwiring. I had one client who lived with her mother, and her mother was an alcoholic. As you can imagine, her world was very negative around her. And she said she woke up one night, she was about 14, and her mother had a frying pan in her hand and with her. Her mother was seeing, but she certainly wasn't seeing the daughter. And this is very scary moments. And to live in those survival levels of living that she then went on and had been brought up with that, it takes the joy out of life. Everything is tainted. You can't move on from that. And this lady ended up having ME. She had nothing more to give from her life. And this happened very early on when she was about 22. I met her later on after she had spent many years in bed and was up and able to move around. But we worked together, and a lot of her influences were her mother's. She carried her mother's wounds and emotions that were able to move, and her energy changed to support her, to give her life, and it was a lifeline to her. It comes in big packages, large, small, and we create these templates to live. Once absorbed, we make our own packages of emotions from living. And we then start to cap and limit ourselves in all sorts of ways that will also come out in health issues. There can be segments. Some children within a family will only take on a small percentage of IGTA, whereas others will take on the whole shebang. And this will also involve past life influences. Have they lived that before? Because they default into these old ways. It will affect culture, lineage. It's a global issue, as I wrote about in my book, Mirror Image. It lives on. And as we talked about, proving Holocaust victims, those living in war-torn areas and zones. Of course, we've had so many social and wars that are still going on today that will be conditioned to irrational fears that are passed on. I have worked with people whose father was in World War II, prisoner of war, Polish, etc. Big drinking habits, big smoking habits that then went on to grandchildren who had taken up those traits. They have a taste for it and they move on onto that. One of the things about IGTA is it is subconscious. It is a mind patterning that takes over. It becomes dominant, and the most dominant emotions will be passed on, such as disappointment, fears, anxieties, traumas, weariness with life. And instead of enhancing life, it's declining and declining our future generations. So the more we clear this out, the more our future generations will have a clean slate. Essentially, in medicine and therapy, we have a small vision approach from my perspective. We don't look at the bigger picture. We treat the outcomes, not the cause. We have a cluster approach in rectifying, and we need to visit a range of different professionals to find the answers. It's, from my view, it's a mistake to treat the symptoms. We are not just a group of body parts. Everything works together. Nothing is separate. We may all look good from the outside, but what's happening inside? Because believe me, it's a very different picture when we look inside. And I found that when I was treating women with infertility, miscarriage, etc., the internal state was not up to producing life, producing new life. It was in a poor state, and it needed a lot of attention to help these women to become ready for birth. Fathers too. Sperm count not as good as it should be, and so on. So what is the true state of the body function? We've all got organs, but they're not all working at 100%. Believe me, they're not. And if we've had injuries in other lives, that will bring down that function of that particular organ or system. We look at these people, which one is suffering from lack of self-esteem, fear? Which one suffers from digestive issues, PTS, suffers pain? They live with stress and irrational behavior. They all look great. And I can have people come into my workshops and on the treatment table, they look absolutely fantastic. But when I check them out, they are living on a very low level. And I found that with COVID, people that have had COVID, they've been runners, or have the fitness program, they do all of that. And you wouldn't expect them to have gone on to get COVID, but they have, and they've been extremely ill with it. But the functions of their systems were very low. They couldn't fight it off. They didn't have the function within to give them that strength to fight off. They may have survived, but it's taken its toll. And by working on these levels, working with systems, with individuals, we can bring them into better health. They're not taking medication. Medication won't do this. You need hands-on and direct action. None of this will show up on an X-ray, but we can find a lot of damage. So we have a cutting-edge combination techniques to help with biological hidden factors. It deals with core issues. It gives answers to birth trauma, depression, stress, post-traumatic stress, irrational behavior, anxiety, and inherited lineage transference via the womb, responsible for many of our ills and mental health issues. It helps to dilute, it eradicates, it corrects, rebalances in a unique way for enhanced health, happiness, and future destiny. I found that the body keeps a log, and in DARE, we work with the body and the body works with us. It shows us, it gives us a map of overveiling and signposts as to where those dysfunctions are. It's not hypnotherapy, it's not regression, yet we do tap into extraordinary events or themes with emotional impacts and harsh living that will affect and keeping them in history rather than today. Imprints left in tissue, bone, as well as in brain and pathways, in the energetics. Keeps them in situ by cellular, energetic, and neurological entrapment and a treadmill of repetition. Absorption and mirroring adds into life and will continue to increase and accumulate unless removed at the core level. Meditation, yoga, those sort of things will not remove this. You can be sitting there for 12 months doing meditation. It will not remove it. We need to have direct action for lasting results, and you do get lasting results. We don't look at just one life because we could have 100 lives of fear, 100, 200 lives of survival, 400 lives. I found with one client when I was putting all this together in the late 1990s, and she was a therapist. She taught Chinese medicine, and she heard one of my talks. She came along and said, I have a problem, can you help me? And she would have a surge of anger that came into her out of the blue. No reason. She said, I've got a good life, I love what I do, I have a supportive family, I have no reason to have anger. And yet it came out of control. And when I tuned into her and started working with her, there were 400 lives of battle. She had been in every battle you can think of. And of course, they have to psych themselves up. And she was full of this, and this was still raging within her. We did a session, cleared it out. She came back for what I called a mopping up session, because there's usually things to mop up and little bits and pieces that haven't quite gone. She hadn't had one anger episode since that first session. It gives people answers, especially around IGTA, that it's not theirs. A past life influence is not theirs today. They've lived it and it's got stuck, and we need to unstuck and move on. So why we need to deal with all systems to remove the impacts of emotions, a lifeline to well-being and better health. It works fast. It gets to the root of the influences. We deal with triggers, emotional triggers, psychological triggers, as well as patterns, because we do create those patterns. It's repetitive. When we say things over and over again, we lock ourselves in to a way of living. Mindfulness is also taught in part of the personal development workshops that I teach. So it stops the cycle and circle. We find the core drives. 6 senses are used and can identify where an X-ray won't. So we have a lot of inner gold, as I call it, 6 senses that can work with you, that give you a different picture of the health of that person and how we can find lots and lots of levels of discordancy, misalignment. And we do work with timelines. We do find those events. We do identify areas and systems of dysfunction with our 6 senses, which is why we have an induction to get everybody on the same page and working together. Most of our issues are around lack of love, receiving love. And again, the Light Healing Program is also a self-development where we can get people to open up to receive. So we need to rethink mental health from my perspective. How we approach mental health issues and disorders aren't working. Numbers are continually rising. We firefight. We work with the result instead of the cause. We suppress with medication and ignore the real reasons. We're taught to manage depression and pain. Painkillers and antidepressants won't work from an IGTA and past life influence. And we know huge numbers of people say they haven't worked for them. They've still got the pain. They've still got the depression. Historical influences from adverse trauma have been proved with the 1970 ACE trials. This was adverse childhood experiences. And what they did, they looked at the levels of chronic health and where it came from. And they found that a lot of these things started in childhood. I've worked with people who their cancer started when they were watching domestic violence at a very young age. If we can work with people at this level, they wouldn't go on to create these chronic disorders. It would be stopped. Some of these things they found were down to trauma and shock, bereavement, childhood abuse, neglect, accidents, grief, loss, the divorce, the social and relationship issues that came from those very early days of adverse childhood experiences. But it doesn't stop when you're a child. It goes on. We go on to have those adverse experiences. And shock is huge with all of these elements and themes that we're looking at here. And they found that it went on to create heart attacks, hypertension, diabetes, strokes, cancer. We're not talking about little issues here. We're talking about ginormous disorders that can be prevented by working with people with emotional shock and adverse experiences, and get that off them as fast as possible before it turns into a physical disorder. It can be done. Mentally, we are affected by events and memories. We have reactions and behavior. It forms patterns and triggers for further responses, and the mind logs it as a normal response. Abnormal reactions, overactive, obsessive reactions, and behavior is formed and continues to be formed from the triggers, because the mind says, I know how to deal with this. I've done this before. And however adverse it was, it will be again. Stress hormones will automatically release when we are in fear, trauma, adverse events will release automatic hormonal responses. Real and fantasy scenarios are logged and biological reactions will occur. Our subconscious does not recognize the difference between reality and fantasy. It's scary to realize that we absorb and influence by everything we see and hear. In Finland in 2018, they gave people stories, they told them stories, they watched films, they read books, they viewed and observed, and they were asked to mark where their emotions were. And they came up with some pictures. This was where we found the black parts of those pictures that I'm showing you here, where we store the emotions, is where we cut ourselves off. We become numb. And where we go into this fear and shock, adverse shock, of where we continue to store, and we become less and less of ourselves. We become this shell of soul. And I explain that in the title of the book, which is Shell of Soul. We become less of ourselves. Health and psychological issues are related to emotional, hormonal influences from IGTA, past lives, etc. It forms weakness within the physical, and it's plagued by repetition. It sets boundaries and limits and stops us in our tracks with repetition. It resets us to old ways of living and behavior, and we need to get all of those roots out. It's no good cutting off the top, because it's going to grow again. We need to get to those roots. And this is where we need to get to the core. As I've said, driven by subconscious. So we're not even conscious of our behavior or what's going on for us. And becoming numb, well, do we feel anything? We find lots of people who don't. And that's a scary thing. We don't have to have lived it to be driving it today. And fantasy and watching will also be logged as being a real experience. So if you watch scary films all the time, you will be having that biological and hormonal surge of cortisol, adrenaline, that will affect you physically, internally. The solution is to change the biological and hormone response and by cellular decline. Remove and eradicate all roots is the solution to better health and well-being. Physically, chemical responses to feeling and behavior. We get the decline internally, dis-ease, dysfunction in systems. Energetic will decline. We have mismatch within systems because being on the adrenaline fix, we are turning off the gut every time we do that. And systems will reroute energy around the physical body. And it may take hours or even days for those systems to come back online. And if you're pressing the button every 2 minutes, then it can't get back to where it needs to be. Memories are stored internally in the sacral plexus, which is why we have so much gut dysfunction. This is where we can store all our criticism, all our disappointments, etc. Huge amount in here. And we really target these areas to clear in some of the training and personal development. It can be held in fascia, systems and bones. So we can be thinking that our life is normal. We are normal, but maybe abnormal to the person next to you when we are carrying all of this that we are living. Historical lives also influence and are part of the jigsaw. They can overveil as we live more of our history than today's life. And believe me, I've found people that are only living 2% of this life, 98% of previous lives, and very irrational behavior, fear, survival, and the reptilian brain dominance. The frontal lobe is very much affected, and it is active 24/7 within us as it reroutes emotions and cognitive responses to keep us on this Groundhog Day that we keep waking up to. We repeat the cycle and circle in various ways in life and live Groundhog Day in action without any conscious awareness. So there are two arms to Alunas, Zest of Life program. One is the practitioner's route, and the other is through the Light Healing Program. Light Healing Program, Power of Three stages of development. There is also Secrets of Universal Life and Soul Psychology, which is a weekend training about you and what is stopping you from your agenda, what is holding you back. There are YouTube interviews on various subjects, there's blogs, there's articles on the webinar, and webinars to download on the website. I do offer block booking options with extra discount and support days. We do have reduced prices as it's now all gone digitally, and therefore I have reflected that onto the customer because they don't have to travel either. They don't need to stay at a hotel, etc., etc. So you can, it makes it easy for everybody. It also means it can go global. There are no restrictions. And there is whole packages, block booking options that come with books and CDs and DVDs and so on, and downloads from the website for you to. So we have DARE induction and foundation that's starting on the 2nd to the 6th of October. Foundation 16th to the 19th of October, stage 1, F1, F2, the end of October to the 3rd of November. And I'm offering coffee and chat every Thursday, 4 p.m. throughout September and October. It's a Zoom meeting where we discuss different themes, but also what the individual wants answers on, whether that's workshops, fact books, or seminars and other things that are coming up. So lots to choose from. The Digital Light Healing Light Healing Program is a personal development program. It's heart-centered training, and Secrets of Universal Life and Soul Psychology is the 19th and 20th of September. It's a weekend training. It's got the wow factor and really helping you to connect to other parts of you that haven't been online. On the 25th of September, there is Angel Day. But this is Angel Day with a difference. This is connecting to your human angel and celestial activations that are from a higher perspective of angelic self. And that's run on the 25th of September. And the high energy of the Power of Three starts on the 26th to the 27th of September. This is the one that stops absorption. It helps you to live your life without picking up on other people's negativity. When people are angry, whatever, they are spraying us with, if you could see it, it would be black, of where we are being showered of people's negativity. They're angry, rage, frustrated, whatever, and you are picking that up. If you're living with somebody with depression, you will become depressed as it filters into you. This can stop the absorption. It's a complete support package for you. There is also 3 new tools, techniques to be able to work with others. One of them is with selenite. So if you want to join in on the 26th and 27th of September. Please do book early, because I will need to send you selenite. It's a package of manual selenite, DVD, and a whole package for you that you kickstart for yourself. Professional people have attended this. They don't want to give treatments to other people, but they want to help themselves. And people have had lots of feedback from professionals saying, you know, my meetings now go so much more smoothly. I'm not picking up on other people's stuff. School teachers, etc. All sorts of professionals do this because it works and it helps them to live their lives and have peace within, instead of the turmoil of what you're being bombarded with, even standing in the supermarket lineup. So there's lots of things you can find on the website. We have different books. We've talked about some of them. Shell of Soul is the one that helps you to understand what's going on for you energetically, your six senses, and so on and so forth. There is a 4-hour DVD that's given with the foundation training, and there are different DVDs and a chakra CD that talks you through helping you to help yourself, cleansing chakras and energetics, that will help you every day. And people swear by this and listen to it all the time. I have 2 new downloads. I haven't gone for a CD this time. This is a download on the website, two new ones. One is Kuan Yin meditation, seeding new beginnings, and the other one is heart and head, or head and heart meditation, where you have a quiet mind. We do both of these. The head and heart meditation is included in the induction day, where we are helping you to get to you and activating all different aspects of you. And a quiet mind, that's what everybody should have. Shouldn't have a noisy mind. I have a very quiet mind. It only works when I need it to work. I've had some awards that I wanted to share with you. Inspirational Woman and Commitment to Excellence in 2015. I was Therapist of the Year, voted Therapist of the Year in 2018. And I have an award for Excellence in Holistic Training in 2019. It's all heart-centered training. So we're working from a very, very different perspective, working with individuals, and you can help yourself and your family. So check out the website for dates, etc., and look at YouTube. Who Dares Wins, and this is where you can have your life back and fast. So no more suffering. We don't want any of that anymore, and we have a lot to offer you to get to that place, either one-to-ones or experiencing it for yourself, or being a pioneer of change to help people on a big level. It also works digitally. I've changed everything. So we are now working one-to-ones on the digital consultation and treatment with a client, and we can help people receive in their own home because of our present day situation. So we've covered all the squares. And this is where we want all life learning, oneness, nurturing, understanding, soul purpose and integration is our goal for who we can help. If you have any questions, please, you can have the chat box to give questions. And as I say, you can join me at 4 o'clock on Zoom, and you can contact me for the Zoom details, or we can have it passed over to go onto the site, on the Mind, Body and Spirit online site. So thank you for your time. I hope that you have enjoyed my explanation of DARE and the new cutting edge therapy that everybody can have.